Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Brinkley, and I'm a Senior Program Policy Specialist with the National Education Association's ESP Quality Department. I would like to welcome you to the NEA CGPS Grants, the Ins and Outs, Exploring Strategies for Finding Grants Beyond Your District webinar. I, along with my colleague, Lisa Connor, also a Senior Program Policy Specialist with the NEA ESP Quality Department, will be serving as your facilitators for this evening's webinar. This presentation is brought to you by the NEA's ESP Quality Department and NEA Center for Great Public Schools. The ESP Quality Department, housed in the NEA Center for Great Public Schools, represents and advocates for nearly 500,000 NEA education support professional members, also referred to as ESP. Our strategic focus is to elevate ESP careers by developing, implementing, and promoting best practices, policies, and professional supports that equip ESP with the knowledge and skills to become empowered leaders, accomplished professionals, and members of a high-quality workforce prepared to meet the needs of the whole student. Before we get started this evening, I would like to take a moment to walk you through a few important housekeeping items. First and foremost, this session is being recorded. You will receive an email with the link to the webinar recording 7 to 10 business days after the conclusion of this webinar. To help ensure that we capture a quality recording, all participants have been placed in mute upon entry mode. Although all participants have been muted, we ask that you also ensure that you stay muted throughout the session unless unmuted by the host. At the bottom of the webinar screen, you will notice there is a chat feature that is available for your use throughout this session. This interactive feature can be used to ask questions, make comments, or participate in various activities throughout the session. While we have made time for the question and answer towards the end of the webinar, feel free to type questions into the chat box as they come to mind. We will track these questions as they come in and will save all unanswered questions to open up the Q&A time. Should we not have time to answer your question, we will contact you individually with a response. No question is a bad question. Please speak up via the chat feature if you need something clarified or if you have something that you would like to ask the group. Webinar materials and handouts will be made available in 2 ways. Participants of today's live webinar session will be able to download handouts directly from the chat box at the end of the webinar session after you have completed the 3-question evaluation. Participants of recorded sessions will be able to download session-specific handouts directly from the NEA ESPQ webinar archives page underneath the webinar description. Due to technological limitations around participation verification, personalized certificates are only made available to participants of live webinar presentations. As a live participant of tonight's session, you will have 2 ways in which to access your session-specific certificate of completion. One way is that a certificate of completion will be made available via the chat box at the end of the session along with the webinar handouts. A second way is that you can email a request for a personalized certificate to espqweb@nea.org, and we will put that in the chat box. That's espqweb@nea.org. Be sure to include personalized certificate in the subject line and the name of the session and your full name as it appears on your webinar registration in the body of the email request. Now, before we engage in tonight's lively discussion, I would like to begin by acknowledging that we across the country meet on the traditional lands served by Native peoples. We honor America's first people and all elders, past, present, and emerging, and we are called on to learn and share what we learn about the tribal history, culture, and contributions that have been suppressed in telling the story of America. At this time, I would like to welcome my colleague, Dr. Christopher Johnson, who started out as a fellow Transportation Service ESP. Dr. Johnson works as a Senior Grant Specialist in NEA Center for Great Public Schools. We thank him in advance for joining us this evening. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and I see Lisa is here This is going to be a great session. I'm looking forward to sharing what's going on around the grants world at NEA and providing any answers that the members here may have. So I'm looking forward to getting started. As Jessica said, I'm going to be here to answer your questions. I'm going to be at your service. So as I'm going through, feel free to put something in the chat box, and Lisa and Jessica are going to be monitoring the chat box as I'll be presenting, and we'll make sure we get your questions answered. And as Jessica said, I did start off at the age of 16 of driving a school bus. So I was an ESP person when I was in high school. And that took me on to become a teacher and then a principal. And of course, now I'm working for the wonderful NEA and servicing great members like you that have joined us. And hopefully everybody's safe, sound, and looking forward to a great session. We want it to be interactive. We want you to get a lot from it. So if you have any questions, just let us know. So, Jessica, am I ready to go? She might be on mute. Let me see.
You are ready to go.
Okay, thank you. All right. So this technology is different for me, y'all. So everything should be fine. So of course, I am Dr. Christopher Johnson, and so let's jump right into our session today, talking about the ins and outs of the CGPS grants, which is Center for Great Public School Grants. So let's talk about it for a moment. There we go. Our session objectives: to raise awareness of the CGPS grants, and that's the Center for Great Public School Grants. Learn how to find the NEA grants, as well as our Center for Great Public School Grants. Review the grant process. Share examples of current grants, including ESP member grants. Create an opportunity to ask questions and understand how to get help in the future. So let's talk a little bit about the two broad goals from the Center for Great Public Schools and NEA. What we're trying to do with these grants are to create strong affiliates and successful students. We call that union-led school transformation. So if I was doing this live, I'll be asking you right now, do you have any idea what those acronyms mean? WIFM versus WIFF. Since we're doing this by technological and all this good stuff now, I'll tell you what those mean and why those are important, and you'll hear me refer to them. The WIFM means what's in it for me. That's why you write these grants. You're trying to get something that's going to help your students. You want to be a transformational leader. However, in writing grants, you have to pay close attention to WIFF. What's in it for the funder? That means you need to do some research on not just what you would like to achieve through the grant. What is it that that funder is looking for? Do a little research, and that's just not for NEA grants. That's for grants in general. If you're looking for a grant from Bill and Melinda Gates, Kellogg Foundation, do a little research. Find out about what the goals are in their foundation. Wrap that into your ask. So this is going to serve two purposes tonight. We're going to be talking about NEA grants, but we're also going to try to educate you on just the grant process that you'll be able to use later, okay? Roles of the grants. The grant's purpose is demonstrate leadership, quality of public education, engage members, and what's most important from the NEA standpoint is student-centered success, and then collaboration. And then the two goals for NEA, as we just talked about, stronger affiliates, empowered educators for student success. Suggestions. Think about your affiliate and what your needs are and what the capacity is. And when we say capacity, what do you have the ability to do? So when you're thinking about the grants process, we're going to think about the affiliate. And by the way, these grants are affiliate grants. The grants that I'm going to be speaking to you about tonight from the Center for Great Public Schools, they are affiliate grants. They're not individual grants. I normally do this in conjunction with the NEA Foundation when we do it live. The NEA Foundation has individual grants that members can write and get. The two grant programs I'm going to be talking to you about and orientating you to tonight, those are affiliate grants, which means you have to work with an affiliate. That's a state or local affiliate for these grants, okay? Then what are your needs? And then what is your capacity? Again, capacity means quite simply, you can't go out and build a school. You don't have the capacity to do that. You're a teacher or you are an ESP person. So you got to think about what you have the capacity to do as you start thinking about any grant that you may apply for. You want to work collaboratively. We suggest multiple ESP groups or sites working together. Example, 10 grant folks work together in a consortium. So you can think about collaboration. Remember, that's going to be very, very important. You don't have to go at any of this alone. You can work with pre-K or state and local affiliates. You also can work with higher ed institutions. We love to see collaboration. We love to see that you reach out, especially if there's a local college. Find a way to partner with them. That also builds your capacity, because as you an ESP member, or if you are a teacher, you might not have the capacity, but there's going to be some folks at that local college in the education department, maybe the business department, that would love to work with you. So you want to think about that. Grant writing is not just writing that grant. It's also thinking about how can you collaborate effectively to get your message, your transformation delivered. So when you talk about NEA grants, NEA has, believe it or not, write this number down, in excess of $17 million in grants available to you as a member. Now, the NEA GPS fund grants, it's about $6 million a year, and that's what we're going to be talking about. But we also have other grants. So if you type in and get to our NEA website, your NEA website, then you search grants. When you search that, all the grants that NEA has to offer will pop up. We're going to talk directly. We're going to talk directly to you about the grants that Center for Great Public Schools offers. We also have an opportunity for you to work with with ed communities. And we suggest that you join ed communities through mynea360.org and look at the group NEA Grants for Great Public Schools. That group is specific to the Center for Great Public Schools. Myself and my colleague, Barbara Hopkins, we man that, and all of our grantees, they are a part of that. So you can go get some great ideas, you can look at collaborative conversations, and you can ask questions. It is an open group, all right? Center for Great Public School grant programs. There are two. We're going to talk about both of them. The Center for Great Public Schools, or GPS Fund, that is the larger of the two grant programs. We call it a distinct special purpose fund. The reason why it's a distinct special purpose fund is that you actually pay for this grant through your dues dollars. We allow, it's about 2014, there was a dues increase of $3. That goes into the pot for this grant program. So this is a self-funded grant program through your dues dollars, okay? You can apply for up to $250,000 a year for a maximum of 3 years. The minimum is $50,000, and that number is a little different. The minimum used to be $25,000 until we went through what we're going to talk about tonight. This grant program has been revised. It's going to be a big part of our presentation tonight. In addition to that, you also have state and local grant that you can apply for. Those are smaller grants. They're usually through our departments. Center for Great Public Schools has two departments. They have the teacher quality department, and we have the ESPQ department. And those directors and those staff can formulate a way to get those dues dollars out to you, okay? But they're both administered through the Center for Great Public Schools. As you see, they're typically for 1 year. They can be as small as $3,000, as high as $25,000, okay? So there's two avenues for you to get money for your grant programs that you may be looking to fund. NEA strategic goals and NEA organization priority. The NEA strategic goal is build the capacity of the local, state, and national union to secure success of public education. Success of public education. NEA organizational priorities. Now, these priorities are important for you. When we are evaluating the grants that come in, the grant applications, if you have if this is something that becomes your focus, early careers, ECEs, or supporting professional excellence, or racial justice in education, if that becomes your focus, you get extra points for the Center for Great Public School, the grant funds that we're talking about. So you want to try to hit this. If you want to do something else, you're more than welcome to, but this is an area where you can get some extra points. And the points are the rubric that end up getting you the grant. So I would say try to focus or at least tie in to one of these. And of course, we all know in the current climate in the United States, racial justice is just huge. So if there's something that you can do through a grant program that applies to racial justice, it's definitely going to get a good look. Center for Great Public Schools, our state and local fund grants. The application deadline is September 15th. State and local grant guidelines for 2020 to 2021. Only state and local affiliates may apply for a state and local grant. We kind of alluded to that a moment ago. All grantees will be expected to participate in grant funding reporting and evaluation process at the end of the close of the grant cycle, with continued funding contingent upon satisfactory progress in reporting. In order to be considered, each grant proposal should include both a narrative and budgetary information, with the budget data tied directly to the proposed activities. Typically funded grant requests range from $3,000 to $25,000 over a 1 year period. There are some that are a little bit more than that, but that's the typical. Remember that deadline, state and local grants, September 15th. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the bigger of the two grant programs, NEA GPS fund grants. Okay, so the NEA Great Public Schools GPS fund enables grant awardees affiliates to improve student success. That's primary. Since 2013, the NEA GPS fund has provided funds to state affiliates, local affiliates, and their partners that demonstrate leadership in enhancing the quality of public education and engaging students. Funds come from your member dues. I alluded to that earlier. Now, this program changed. If you've had an opportunity at ESP conferences to hear me present on the Center for Great Public School grants in the past, they have changed officially now. And that's what I'm getting ready to orientate you on. And you are the first folks to hear about this, opposed to the staff members at the NEA building. So, you know, you in the catbird seat, so to speak. The NEA Board of Directors has approved changes to the GPS fund grant application. The process in order follows this way. The reason we did it was more efficient management of the grant process to better serve affiliates and members. Now, talk a little bit about that. The reason why we've done this is that we had a lot of grants that are written, and then once they are actually awarded, getting them implemented has been a problem in the past. So that was the motivation to change the process, do more front loading by way of education, contact with the grant professionals, myself, Barbara Hopkins, and our manager, David Boyd, so that when you come to the implementation stage of your grant, you can actually implement what you had on paper. And so we're going to do a lot of front loading and conferencing with you. The development of the planning grant application due annually on September 15th would serve as an abbreviated version of the full GPS fund grant application. That is new. We used to have a process called ITA, where you could write in kind of what you were thinking about. Now we're going to be given what we call a planning grant. It's a mini grant that will allow you to start doing some front loading of your activities, do some research, so that when you get the full grant, you can start rocking and rolling. You can get it going. Those affiliate awarded planning grants will receive a small amount of funding, up to $10,000, and other technical assistance from NEA in order to workshop and flush out their proposals in anticipation of the new February 1st GPS fund grant application deadline. Two deadlines just came to you. The new deadline for the planning grant, September 15th, starting this year. The new grant process for the GPS fund application, the official application, is February 1st, okay? However, you must get a planning grant award before you can get a GPS fund award. That is a huge difference. You used to did not have to do an ITA and still apply for the GPS fund grant. No longer can you do that. You have to apply for the planning grant. You have to have that planning grant awarded, funded, then you can apply for the GPS fund application. Some of what I'm gonna say is gonna be redundant because I helped put this together, but those are two things I want you to remember. All right, what are the changes in the GPS fund? 1 cycle per year. That's a big change. There used to be 2 times you could apply for a GPS fund. That's gone away. Now you only have 1 time once a year, February 1st. That means February 1st, 2021 will be the first time the new GPS fund process will be in effect. Stage 1, planning grant application. We just talked about that. Then stage 2 is the actual GPS fund application, okay? The planning grant components have been added with a streamlined version of the GPS fund. That's very important. When you do, as it says here, the previous ITA, it was a little bit different. You could just basically tell us what you wanted to do, put some goals down. that has changed. Now that planning grant, it is almost a mirror image of the GPS fund application. Therefore, when you do your planning grant, you've told us what you're doing. It's kind of like a thesis. You've already started getting together your idea, you've documented your idea, started working on your goals, working on your budget, and then it becomes incumbent on us to work with you to get you to where you need to be with that GPS fund application February 1st. The IT was not required to be eligible for a GPS fund, but the planning grant award is now prerequisite, all right? Only affiliates that are awarded planning grants will be eligible for stage 2, i.e. to go on to the full GPS fund grant. All right, what are the changes? I'm still talking about the changes. More technical assistance will be given to the planning grant awardees before submitting their full GPS fund application. We plan on, believe it or not, before COVID, we planned on implementing these changes and bringing in our planning grant awardees in the fall. Well, with COVID, we are pretty sure we're not going to do that. So it's going to be a lot more virtual, but you still will have that opportunity to engage the grant specialist, myself and Barbara Hopkins, as you start flushing out exactly what you want to do for that application. The post-grant award addendum process has also been eliminated, which oftentimes delayed the start of the grant work in order to finalize certain details of work, i.e. awardees should be better positioned to begin their work. That's kind of what I was sharing with you a moment ago. The ITA process, you kind of told us what you wanted to do. Then you also did your application. Once you did your application, one of the biggest pitfalls we see with this grant program is folks do not flush out measurable goals, and they don't flush out benchmarks. We need to know that. As a grant administrator, I need to know if granted this money that is not our money, it's membership money, what is going to be your matrix of success? What is it that you are planning on achieving by way of a data point if you are funded this amount of money? The new minimum GPS fund award is now $50,000. It used to be $25,000. The maximum amount is $250,000 per year. That remains unchanged. This graphic just simply highlights exactly what I was sharing with you, and it also tells you about when you actually be awarded. Remember, September 15th, 2020, that date will be stagnant. Will always be September 15th. We have 2020 because that's when it's starting. Planning grant applications are due at that time, all right? October 15th is when the planning grant awards will be announced. You turn in your planning grant application, a month later you'll find out if you've received your planning grant, all right? October 15th through, in this case 2020, through January 31st, 2021, we will have workshops to formulate your full GPS grant proposal. That is new. Used to be with the ITA, you turn the ITA in, myself and my colleague, we will provide you some information by way of feedback. But you were on your own to do your application. We really did not get involved with your actual application to keep it fair. We would answer some questions, but we tried to keep it to the ITA, all right? So this time now from October 15th, you're basically gonna be in like a little club, the GPS club, that's my term, where you'll be able to have access, flush out, ask questions, and hopefully by the time you do your application, you are ready to go. You have your benchmarks, you have your matrix of success, you're good to go. So that's why the whole idea of an addendum where you got to flush out better goals, I'll say more complete goals, that will hopefully go away with this new process. February 1st, 2021 is going to be the first due date for the new GPS fund applications. April 1st, 2021 will be the first award date. That's when the first awards of the new GPS fund will be awarded. And these dates are important. One of the reasons that we try to move these dates up is so that you can get your funding around the time you'll be making decisions around human resources in your school districts. So you'll have your grant money, you'll know you've been awarded, you can start planning effectively for when school opens back up in August normally. So there's a lot of reasons that we move these dates around because a lot of times people were getting awards February, and that's the middle of the school year, almost the end of the school year. So they get the fund, they really don't get started working until August. So that's a lot of thought went into better implementation, better dates for you to get these monies and effectively implement your programs, okay? Again, only affiliates that receive planning grants will be eligible for the full GPS fund grant. Planning grant applications are due September 15th. What do? Before the deadline, go to the NEA main grant site. And we also have the actual grant site here. Scroll down to Great Public School Funds, GPS fund section. look through the resources, grant guidelines, planning grant application, review annual reports, webinars, write your planning grant via online application, can log in, save as you go. That's unique. Not unique, it's new. A lot of times you couldn't save as you go before, so we've put a lot of thought into trying to improve this process. I still recommend you write down every aspect of what you're going to put virtually. You don't want to just put it there virtually and hope it's there. This is technology. If it disappears, as it has in the past, you don't want to be sitting there saying, oh my God, I've lost everything. So make sure you write down everything as you go. You must apply for and be awarded a planning grant to be eligible for the GPS fund. Submit your planning grant application by September 15th. Again, I know some of this is redundant, and it is redundant for a reason. This is new. We want you to write down these dates and actually be an ambassador, because you're the first group to really hear about this. And we welcome your questions. October 15th, the planning grant decisions will be announced. Oversight Committee awards planning grants by October 15th. Very important for you to know, Dr. Johnson, Jessica, Lisa, nobody that works for NEA makes the awards. The Oversight Committee, the GPS Fund Oversight Committee, which is chaired by the Vice President, Becky Pringle, and by other folks, it's a 9-member committee, they make these decisions. So I don't make the decision. We have to say that to folks, because we do have folks that will get some information, such as y'all are getting this information from me tonight. Just because you and I have talked, just because you have attended this webinar, does not mean that Dr. Johnson can help you with this process. I can help you by way of making sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's. But the person reading your I's and T's is the Oversight Committee. If a planning grant is awarded, your application will be eligible for, and you can continue the process to the GPS Fund grant. If your planning grant is not awarded, your affiliate is welcome to reapply the next September. Yes, a whole year. October 15th through 31st, continue to develop your grant proposal, take part in the grant workshops for technical assistance provided by NEA, request NEA Center for Great Public Schools staff consultation. That's myself, Barbara Hopkins, and our manager, David Boyd, as well as you can reach out to TQ and to ESPQ. So use all the resources of NEA so that you can get your grant funded. Revisit the GPS fund guidelines found on NEA.org, and I will talk about those today. Review your resources on Ed Communities. We have webinars. I'll talk to you about those on NEA 360. So if you're really thinking about getting one of these grants, I advise you a good resource is to go to our group site on NEA 360. Fill out all information required for the GPS fund application, which is due February 1st. February 1st, the GPS fund application is due. Obviously, write down all your GPS fund grant via the online application. Save as you go, you may log in, but that save as you go process is gonna be very, very convenient for you. All applications are due 11:59 your local time, which means obviously East Coast, West Coast is gonna have actually 3 more hours than the East Coast simply because they're 3 hours behind. So, but it also means you don't have to worry about trying to get it in this case, 9:00 p.m. if you're on the West Coast. You got the same time, 11:59 p.m. your local time is when these are due. Please get them in by 11:59. At 12:01, this happens, folks. 12:01, 1 o'clock, sorry, they're not going to be considered. You have to wait a year. So please, please, please don't wait to 11:59 to hit send. Please take time to get it done, because we also know how technology is. If you hit send, but it doesn't register until 12:05, we have to be fair. So that second bullet point has crossed some people up. People have gotten upset. Please don't wait to the last minute. We know how technology can be. After deadline, the Oversight Committee meets, reviews all applications. April 1st, GPS Fund Grant Awards are announced. Grant applicants are notified via an acceptance or denial. Further information will be provided to the grant awardees. You will receive support from the NEA Center for Great Public Schools staff for the duration of your grant. And actually, you'll be assigned a grant specialist. That's my primary job. I have awarded grantees. They become my grant. And I know them by heart. I know them by the number. And I'm responsible for making sure they're successful. That's my primary goal as the grant specialist. All right. Information will be provided on a regular basis via a reporting. You have to report on your GPS grant every 6 months. Every 6 months. And what happens is when you do that grant report, it's in two parts. It's a narrative telling us about your goals, and more importantly, your budget. Both of those things have to be in line. And once you get that to your specialist, I review it, or my colleague Barbara. And then if we have questions, we'll ask you those questions. Once that is approved, your next payment will come out. That's important for you to know. If you apply for $250,000, you do not get $250,000 on April 1st. You will get half of that. Once you have did your progress report, you'll get the next half. That's if you got a 1-year grant. I just use the term $250,000. But that's how all the grants run. They're broken up into annual tidbits, and you get 6 months worth of grant funding. Okay, so that's something for you to realize. Execute your plan as approved by the Oversight Committee. Why has that got an exclamation point? You do not have the power to change your goals once it's been funded. The Oversight Committee is approving what you wrote, what was approved. However, if during the process of your grant, there is what we call a course correction. You had 3 goals, you find out one of the goals is just not going to happen because of what's happening on the ground. You have to talk to your grant specialist. Y'all rework that, because everything is about funding, everything is about transparency. Because at the end of the day, those are dues dollars. And what we can't have is someone saying they're going to do A, B, and C. They end up doing D and all the money gone. That's not going to work. So that's why we're in place. We're empowered to help you get exactly what you need, but that's very important. You gotta execute the plan that's approved. Any changes must be signed off on by your grant specialist, including budget. Grant components and examples: title, statement of need, priority focus, brief project description, draft of your GPS fund scope of work, draft of your GPS fund budget worksheet, and that's got in parentheses there up to $750,000 over 3 years. Anticipated partnerships, your communication plan. The reason why I just kind of flowed through that, we're getting ready to go through that, and of course you can ask questions. All right. Title, wanted to be brief, descriptive, no acronyms. That no acronyms also goes through the process of your goals. We know there's a million acronyms. NEA is an acronym, but you want to get away from that when you're writing a grant. You want to spell out everything, because you got to make sure you understand that Oversight Committee, they don't know what your acronym means in your school district. So you don't want them to get frustrated or confused in reading your narrative that you're very passionate about, because you put in so many acronyms that they're like, what in the world is this? By the way, you're not going to have relationships with those oversight committees. They're not going to ask questions. When they're sitting there deliberating, it's what's there, what they can understand, what they can approve. They do not come back and ask you, even if it looks like it's good. If they can't understand it, they're not going to fund it. Okay? So that's important for you to understand. Make it plain. All right? Say what it is. Example, as I said here, name Education Association mentoring program for new educators. This is an example. Name Education Association for recruitment and retention of educators for rural areas. You want your title to really speak to exactly what transformation. That's another word to put down. What transformation are you wanting to achieve by those grant funds? It's very important for you to understand that these are innovative hubs. That's a term that our senior director, Andy Coons, likes. Your grant, and not just this grant, any grant you write should not be a regurgitation of something that's already happening. It's not going to get funded. Nobody in the philanthropic world, or definitely not in the Center for Great Public Schools, we're not looking to fund something that's already being done. Your grant should be innovative. It should be you wanting to do something, you tackling something in your school district that nobody else is doing. That's going to get the attention of the funders, the oversight committee. That's probably going to be funded. Think about that, write that down. Transformation. That's what these grants are about. Statement of need. What are you trying to address? That's kind of what I was just talking about. What data do you have? Beyond education, labor, health, safety, justice, demographics. You want to have that information. We love to see research. What strategy will you utilize to address your need? Utilize data, research, NEA, funder alignment to support the need and your approach. That goes back to the what's in it for the funder. You want to align your, whatever it is you're trying to achieve, you want to align that to what the funder is trying to achieve. I've told y'all what these grants are about: transformation, union-led student success. So if you wrap your goals around those areas, it's going to get the attention of the oversight committee. If it's not about that, probably not going to get funded. All right. Include information about the target area of the grant, such as demographics and the geographic area. Make it personal. Okay. Statement of need. This is just an example. I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading it, but the bottom line is, if you look at this example here, directions include information and outlines that establishes what your problem is. What is it you're trying to tackle through this grant? The money that's going to be given to you, what is it going to change? You want to make that plain in this statement of need. Utilize data, research, NEA program alignment. Keep saying that to support your need in this approach. Include information about your target area of the grant, such as demographics in the geographic area. All right, so I'm gonna read this example. I said I wouldn't, but I want you to get a flavor here. All right, example: State of XX is focusing on an outreach program for rural schools for professional development in the area of cultural competency, improving instruction and technology in the classroom. The large percent of the students of color and poverty are born in rural areas. Okay, in this case, it's C chart. 34% of your students are living in rural areas, and of those, 72% are in poverty. Our state has 4 UNISERV staff, which serve 582 square miles, 48 counties, with the average school size of blank. It is anticipated that 52% of our members, educators, will retire in the target area between 3 to 5 years. And it says here, quote your source. I'm gonna pause here. These numbers are important. Where it says here, quote your source, do not put in data that you haven't sourced. That doesn't look good. Excuse me. Only put in data that you can quote the source. That's a good idea. Those areas are facing technical shortages, teacher shortages. Quote your sources. Don't just make a statement. If you're going to say there's a teacher shortage, tell us where, why. And technology use is a key tool to meet some of the demands in the future. Why? Quote your source. If it is the need for cultural competency, improving instruction, and technology in the classroom that is arising from these changes, as well as a teacher shortage, identify it. That's driving our affiliates' need for leadership in these areas. So understand what we got in here. We got data. You're telling us it's about cultural competency because you're talking about color, you're talking about poverty. This is a very good example of what will capture the attention of the oversight committee. But most importantly, if you're gonna quote something like 3 to 5 years, make sure you quote that source. Don't just put that in. All right. Priority focus. Applications with priority focus of early career educators and or racial justice in education will receive additional weight points in the scoring and evaluation process. Will your proposed work focus either on both or one of them? We get grant applications, folks, that will say, because of what I just said, that you're gonna get extra points for early career educators and racial justice, and they'll check the box that they're gonna classify or they're gonna focus on both, but their narrative does not flesh that out. Please hear me loud. Don't do that. If you're not gonna focus on one or both, don't check that box. It makes it look like you just checked that box, but to get the points, but you really aren't focusing on that. And so my suggestion is, if you are going to focus on it, check the box, tell us why, how. But don't check the box and don't tell us that. Okay? Then we're going to talk about the project, a brief project description. It's real brief. 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why. Identify some key outcome. No jargon. Like a newspaper, first paragraph. Okay? Kind of your elevator speech. You want to be able to, when you're doing this brief description, you want to basically sell us on why we should fund you. Okay? So 5 W's is something for you to think about. Again, no jargon. That's another word for no acronyms, no something not something that's kind of, something that you say around your district. Remember, this 9-member committee is nationwide. So if they don't know what you're talking about, they're not going to fund you, okay? This is another example. And here, this example is just simply saying that most people in the United States view poverty for students as skin color as an urban issue. In reality, the majority of students in poverty, including the majority of students of color, live in rural areas in 17 states. See statement of need. And are taught by 92% white educators. Brookings 2015, very important. They sourced it. They told us where they got that from. Brookings 2015 found that students of color do better when targeted by at least one minority educator. So you want to put in, if you're going to quote something, you want to put in that source, okay? The plan is twofold. Develop a grow your own educator program for educators of color in rural areas that begins with students, with families in elementary school and follow students throughout college and their first 5 years of teaching, okay? So I'm not going to read all this, but what I'm trying to share with you here is your brief project description should still follow the same rules of everything else I've been talking about. If you're going to quote something, source it. Then walk us through what, if funded, what it is you're planning on changing through these funds. That's your brief project description, okay? And as Jessica said, this will be available later, so you can read through. I'm also looking at our time. It's already 7:41, so I want to make sure I get through this and give you an opportunity for some questions, okay? So I'm gonna truncate a couple of things. Goals and outcomes. You may submit one goal. That goal should be a SMART goal. Excuse me, I say should. My manager today sent this back and said consider. I'm telling y'all, if you don't make a SMART goal, it's not going to be as advantageous for you as if you do a SMART goal. Take the time to flush this out. SMART, and we know this as educators, make it specific, make it measurable, make it attainable, make it relevant, make it time bound. That measurable piece, please understand this term, measurable benchmark. If you're going to affect 10 teachers, 5 years, say that. Tell us what your measure is. Don't just say we want to implement this project. Okay, implement it with who? How many people are going to be affected? These are what we mean by measurable goals. And when I talk to my grantees, it's about benchmarking. So it's how many people are going to be affected and what is your outcome? Okay, I want to think about that. This further explains what specific means, about the measurable goals. I'm not going to spend time on this. If we had more time, I would. This just gives you more of an explanation of what specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely means, okay? Goals and outcomes. This is an example of a goal, all right? 42 early career educators, meaning from 1 to 10 years, will be matched with a veteran member teacher to participate in the mentoring program over 3 years in order to impact student achievement in early career teacher retention and teacher leadership. This is an example of a well-written goal. That's an example there, all right? And there's more information here that they go into, but that goal will capture their attention, all right? Scope of work. Scope of work is something that this is used for you to flush out exactly what you want. Think of this as a roadmap, okay? All right, so what you're gonna write down on your scope of work is what you're planning to do in bite-sized pieces and a time frame, okay? This allows you to flush out your idea. Don't list everything in your plan, but you want to list out most of it. List only what you want to be accountable for financially, programmatically to meet your goals, okay? Align with 6 to 12 months due to the reporting process we already talked about. Key, list what members, non-members will be engaged. List what staff, caucuses, board members, leadership will be engaged. Flush all of that out. That's important. This is what our actual scope of work looks like. And you can see what it happens. You're going to write out your goal, your key activity, anticipated outcomes, timeline, members, non-members, how they're going to be engaged, numbers and roles, affiliate staff leadership responsible for it, 6-month report, annual report. This is just a further example of what it would look like. Okay, not going to spend time on that. This is just another example with it filled out. All right. Funding options for these grants: dues, fees for service, and these are things that you can do, you can fund with the grants. Okay, so this is kind of strange, but I'm gonna talk to you about what this means. We want you to collaborate. So the funding options here is that you need to make sure that these dues dollars are paying for this grant. Okay, but you can also get. We would like to see you collaborate with fees that are accessible to you, either fee for service, Title II funds within your school district's PD budget. Your principal and your staffing office has that. Contributions, sponsorships, other grants, other revenue sources, nonprofit partners, such as the United Way. With our community schools grants, a lot of those grantees work with the United Way. Also, you want to think about your in-kind, non-monetary funding options, which means if you can get your school district to let you use the building, that's an in-kind funding. And then, of course, your Title I ESSA funds, huge. ESSA funds are about local control. You want to tap into those, all right? And so by writing this grant, you want to look at different ways that you can collaborate with other funding mechanisms that's already in your school districts, okay? Other governmental grants, partner with school districts and regions, partner with other nonprofits and other governmental entities, partner with businesses. Businesses love to see teachers and educators take initiative, okay? Quote down here, one reason a business succeeds is because of good public education. So you want to make sure you say that. All right. This is an example of the actual budget that you will submit, okay? And this is what it looks like. So you have these broad areas that you can get funded: personnel and staffing, all right, salaries, benefits, paid release time, stipends, substitutes, all right, and this breaks down your total, subtotal for your staffing. You also can fund travel, airfare, mileage, lodging, meals, ground transportation. You also can fund consultants, vendors. Now, folks, don't go out here and be paying, I'm not gonna name any, folks to write your grants. Consultants charge big bucks for you to get these grants written. That's what we are empowered to help you do. We're not, and we look down on you paying some outside entity a consultant fee from these dues dollars. So I'm not saying you can't use a consultant, but I'm telling you it will be scrutinized. I am going to tell you that. And so my advice to my grantees: don't write a lot of consulting fees in. This is meant for you, your affiliate, learning a new strategy, implementing that strategy, and then being able to do a trainer type deal. Not just paying a consultant to come in and do a one-time PD and then leave, okay? Then there's other direct costs: training materials, curriculum, office supplies. You can pay for those through the grant. Resources: human, members and partners, in-kind, stuff and space, financial, money. We talked about how you can get some money. Grant restrictions, very important. Overhead expenses, similar to indirect costs. That's a catch-all. You can't buy a lot of things such as computers, things like that, hardware. Can't do that, all right? You can't pay somebody a big salary unless, and I'm jumping down to the last one, hiring of permanent positions. Unless there is a commitment from the applicant to support the position in the program budget after the grant term ends, that's going to be a problem. Hiring a full-time or part-time person limited to manage a grant, that's okay. But we don't like, and we don't like to fund big-time positions, high-dollar positions, and then there's no support after the grant ends. Okay, that means your program is going in. All right, going back up, public relations activities, can't pay for those. Okay, they're built in the communications plan, but you can't hire a public relations firm to run that. Now, if you say you're going to do some things by way of social media, you got to pay for some of that, we that's fine. But you can't hire, and we don't like to see hiring outside folks to do your work. We want you to learn through this process. Can't fund legislative programs, can't fund political campaigns, Capital improvements. Can't go out and build a new school with this money. Can't build a new classroom with this money. That's called a capital improvement. Larger equipment purchases like computers and printers and all that. No, don't like to see that. Programs or activities covered by other NEA grants or funded by other NEA monies. Please know, all grants work through the same entity at NEA now. Used to be we had people that would get a grant from one department, another grant is exactly the same thing from another department. Well, they're now talking to each other. So don't do that. Apply for one grant, get funded, run with that. But please don't shop the building. That's the term. With the same exact grant request in different departments. That's not going to look good. You might not get funded at all. Or maybe one person will fund you. But just don't do that. That's not a good idea. You want to look at your anticipated partnerships. And that's something for you to think about. I'm not going to spend time on this. Right now, you should be thinking about who can help us with this work. So you don't go at it alone. All right? Partners, same situation. I'm not going to go through this slide. You want to be thinking about who are partners that can help you with this work. All right? There's another one about partners. This just simply gives you some examples. And I will talk about this. Your school district is a partner, Department of Ed, school board, other educational entities, community, business, government, faith-based, nonprofits, and universities. That's a big one. Not going to go through this, but I will say this. Make sure if you're talking about a partnership, it's an equal investment. It's not just you putting somebody down. If they're a partner, they're doing something. And that strengthens your application. This is just talking about finding common ground, about partners. Communications plan, this is the template. You will have to fill this out. We want you to flesh out and tell us how you plan on communicating your awarded grant to the public. All right, your target audience, media channels, Twitter, TV, social media, newspaper, key message, possible partners. Always want to have NEA as a partner, always. We're always going to be a partner, so we want you to put that down, okay? And then, of course, responsibility. Who's going to be responsible for making this happen? And, of course, started out with your anticipated timeline. It's very similar to your scope of work document. This is just flushing out what you're doing for the communications plan, all right? This is an example of a funded GPS grant. This was actually my grantee. This was a 2 ESPs got together with this one. It was in Woodbridge Township. And what they did was they was trying to disrupt the school to prison pipeline. And they got a grant and they would have after school activities for at-risk youth. And they fed them, as they talked about here with food insecurity and in impoverished households. And they took them on field trips. They exposed them to other opportunities. I really enjoyed this one. So this is just an example of what you could do. The name says it all, impacting the school to prison pipeline. By the way, those titles are very important. And so that's what they did in Woodbridge. That one has sunsetted. That one has now ended. It was a 3-year grant. This is a current grant. This is one of my grants also. This is East Orange, New Jersey Maintenance Association. They are using their grant to implement the ESP professional growth continuum that is ran through the ESPQ department. And so these are all ESP members, and it's an exemplary grant. They really, not only are they implementing the professional growth continuum, they're also gaining a lot of new members because they're showing value in what their union is doing. So it's awesome. It's awesome. You also have an opportunity to view the NEA GPS Fund annual report. This is online, and the website, just go to the grants. When you get to the same area where you would apply for grants, we have 2 that we've compiled. This is the latest one. It lists all of the GPS grants through 2019 and their goals, their focus. It's a great opportunity for you to go and look and see what's been done previously, and so you can get some ideas for something that may help you with your grant. Help is available. Remember we have webinars that have been already posted on the NEA 360, NEA Grants for Great Public Schools. Module 1, Strategic Focus, tells you exactly how, if you go through these modules, you can write your grant, bottom line. They are done by us. So if you go through these modules, it'll help you. Strategic Focus, links and affiliates. 2, goals, outcomes, branding, NEA links, budget, partnership, sustainability, and then your final writing, and mistakes to avoid. Planning tools, these are other tools, not through NEA, that can help you as you're gaining your focus, getting everything ready, okay? And now we're ready for questions and answers, right at 7:55. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to Jessica, because my only last thing is who we are. We are Center for Great Public Schools, and our department, it's not really a department, it's just part of the center, is grants. And we deal with the two grants that we just talked about. My manager is David Boyd, my colleague Barbara Hopkins, and myself, we are grant specialists, and we are at your service. So any questions? It's now back to Jessica and Lisa, and I've enjoyed presenting. I hope you've gotten something from this very quick webinar, but I'm at your service, and these are my contact numbers along with my colleague Barbara. Jessica?
Thank you so much, Christopher. That was a great presentation. We would now like to open up the floor for question and answer. As participants are placed in mute upon entry mode, we ask that you please continue to utilize the chat area to post your questions. And if we're unable to answer your question before the end of this session, we will make sure to contact you individually to make sure that you get the answer to your question. But we have collected all the questions that have been put in the chat up to this point. And so if you have any additional questions or you think of anything, just continue to type them in the chat and we'll capture them. And right now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Lisa Connor, who will facilitate the question and answer portion.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Christopher. The first question is, can the Stage 1 planning grant take more than a year to do if problems arise due to COVID?
That's a very good question, and that's you know, the planning grant is new. Put it this way, you remember when you are awarded that planning grant, you're under no obligation to fill out a application for the GPS fund grant. So me, Christopher, answering that question, yes. What happens is you'll get that planning grant, no strings attached. That planning grant was based on what you documented in that planning grant application. So that grant is yours to take advantage of the information from NEA, from gathering. And that's one of the reasons that we want to do the planning grant, because you may find out as you're doing that planning grant, you're not ready to do that full application, which means it could take over a year. That means that because you got that planning grant, I'm sure, and this is good, I'm gonna write this question down for the person to ask that question. In my mind, if you got the planning grant 2020, but you end up not applying until February 2022, I think that would be considered. So I'm gonna say yes.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Being in the second year of my grant, this is someone who already has a grant, and due to COVID-19 really taking a toll on what we were able to complete this year, will there be an extension of grant monies or time to complete the work or the goals?
Very good question. Absolutely. We are very, very aware. Two things. These grants are 1 year, 2 year, 3 year grants. However, it is not uncommon, even under regular circumstances without COVID, that we extend. We extend in 1 year increments. So this COVID situation, though, is very serious. It's a health situation. Yes, all you need to do is email your grant specialist, myself or Barbara, whoever your specialist is. Let them know that we know you're experiencing COVID. That's number one, first and foremost. Just let them know that, hey, we've halted what we're doing right now, and we know that because school's not in, and that we're anticipating needing a extension. Now, the extension is given when you do your annual report, okay? So understand that right now, if your grant is not ending, you're just giving us a progress report, letting us know what you're doing. At the end of your grant period, say it's a 1 year grant, and the year is done. When you do that annual, which is your final progress report, there's a box that you can check to say, I need an extension, and you just simply tell us what the extension, why you need the extension, tell us how much money you have right then, and we will give you that extension. We do that all the time.
Okay, someone wants to know, how many planning grants do you award?
That's a good question. There's a distinct amount of money. We've never did planning grants yet, so I don't know. I don't know how many people will get planning grants. That's a very good question. Here's the answer. We don't know. I think I'm writing that question down. These are great questions. We know that as far as the GPS fund, we only got $6 million. So once they have funded $6 million worth of grants, that's all they can fund. Now these planning grants, that's coming from the same pot, same money. So I don't know how many. I can't give you that answer. But and I don't think we'll have that answer, but I'm going to ask that question. If you would like my email or email Jessica, they can get in touch with me. I'm going to ask my manager about that question. But I think at this point, we don't have that answer. But
if you're denied a grant, what does NEA offer to in terms of help so that to get you prepared better, so next time you can have a better shot at being awarded? Do you give feedback on how to make it better? What do you offer?
Okay, good question. All right, with the ITA we're not doing ITA process anymore. With these planning grants, if you are denied, yes, you can ask for feedback. You have to physically ask. That means that ask goes to David Boyd, and we can give you feedback. That's on both of the grants. So, even if you did a planning grant and you apply for the full grant, on either one of those grants, if you get denied, just send an email to David Boyd asking for feedback, and we'll get that feedback to you. And if you need additional help, we'll offer that help. Yes.
Okay. And last question, I think you answered this already, but I'll ask you again. If you're awarded a planning grant, does that guarantee that you will be awarded a grant?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Now, if you're awarded the planning grant, you got the planning grant.
Right.
You got up to $10,000. And I say up to. You got to tell us how you plan on spending that money. Now, that's yours. Up to. Now, no, it does not guarantee that you're going to get a GPS fund grant. It guarantees that you can apply for a GPS fund grant. That's what it guarantees. In the absence of that award of a planning grant, the big difference now, you can't wait, and please hear me, you can't wait to apply for the GPS fund grant if you didn't get a planning grant. That's the big difference with these grants. Please hear that.
Okay. And one last question, and then we have to sign off because our president, Lily Eskelson Garcia, is hosting a webinar for RA delegates that starts at 8 o'clock, and we don't want folks to be too late for that. But the last question is, do you have to submit annual or semi-annual reports on status for the planning grant?
No. That process is pretty finite. It's meant. That planning grant is meant to accomplish certain things to prepare you for that GPS fund grant. So once those things are accomplished and they've been encumbered, which means you've spent the money to do those, that's done. So no, I don't anticipate, and that's not the protocol for planning grants, because it's only $10,000. I know that says only is maybe the wrong word. That's the protocol for planning grant is just to prepare you. That's not something, you're not writing a planning grant, by the way, to implement much. That planning grant is only to plan for you to do the GPS fund grant. That's when you'll be implementing goals and strategies. Planning grant is just to get you into, like I say, the GPS fund club, so we can flush out your goals, flush out your budgetary issues, and get you ready to do that full application.
Great. Christopher, thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica, but I just want to say that we were excited to see so many ESP members on here and hope that we will see many more ESP submissions from you all.
Thank you, Lisa. And so this will conclude the Q&A portion of tonight's webinar. We would like to thank you so much for your active participation during this session. As you know, the pandemic is having a devastating impact on our students, educators, and especially our communities of color. And in times like these, we depend on the stability and support of public schools, public health systems, and public safety nets that provide those supports. These services form a network of support that help our communities grow and thrive, and now face devastating cuts due to the economic downturn. Whether we are Black or white, Latino or Asian, Indigenous or immigrant, we must stand united to ensure our health, safety, and future success. That is why the NEA has launched a national campaign to demand that Congress respect the work educators do, that they keep our students, communities, and colleagues safe, that they support our families and remove barriers for our collective participation and voice. No exceptions. Congress can do this by immediately passing legislation to stabilize funding for public education in the upcoming school year, as well as addressing inequities impacting our students' opportunities and provide the necessary resources to protect our students and educators as they re-enter our nation's public schools. This moment calls on us to go all in for all of us. If you would like to be a part of this call to Congress, please visit NEA.org/COVID action to see how you can be a part of the action. If you are watching this presentation as a recording, to request a general session specific certificate of completion, please send your request by emailing espqweb@nea.org. All requests must include the session title and the on-screen certificate of completion code. Session certificates will not be provided if your viewer code is not included in the email request. Note, due to limitations in our ability to track attendance after live sessions, requests for personalized certificates will only be provided for participants of live webinars whose attendance can be verified. The certificate received for viewing recorded sessions will be session specific, but will not include personalized names. We are now at the conclusion of our webinar, and so on behalf of NEA's ESP Quality Department and the Center for Great Public Schools, we would like to thank you for taking the time to participate this evening. There are many ways that you can continue to stay engaged on topics such as tonight's discussion, and one resource that Christopher mentioned earlier is by joining the NEA Ed Communities. Ed Communities is NEA's online professional learning community, which allows educators to collaborate on issues that are important to them. You can share resources and ideas, network, and much more. You don't have to be an NEA member to join. You can search a variety of groups. Christopher mentioned tonight that there is a group specific to grants, and so you can search by topic. If you don't see the group that you want, you can even create a group yourself and invite people to join your group. The link to this resource I'll put it in the chat for the web address. It's my NEA 360. But please be sure to also continue to visit our professional development website for the ESP Quality Department. The web address is on the screen, nea.org/ESPPD. You visit that site to stay up to date on upcoming webinar presentations, as well as to access our webinar archives page where you can find the recordings of our sessions. On behalf of the Center of Great Public Schools, NEA ESP Quality Department, I would like to once again thank Dr. Johnson for tonight's informative webinar session, and thank you all for your participation. Please be sure to visit nea.org/ESPPD to stay up to date for both recorded and upcoming webinar sessions. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night from ESP Quality.